Well, hello, and welcome to this week's video that I'm going to start with a question. Are your bad boundaries ruining your shot for real love, or are you sabotaging your existing relationships with your crappy boundaries? That is the question, because that is what we're going to be talking about on this entire video. Is all I'm going to be handling boundaries. Healthy boundaries, unhealthy boundaries, and if your answer is yes, bad boundaries are wrecking it for you, I'm going to help you fix that. My name is Terri Cole. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a relationship expert, and I'm the founder of the Real Love Revolution. So let's dive into boundaries. The reason I love this topic is because it's the most common thing that people come to me for. My demographic is a lot of very high functioning women, and they still have terrible boundaries, personal boundaries. Difficulty saying no. So let's first establish, before I get into giving you some ideas, we want to identify what is your style of boundary drawing, if you have one. And then I'm going to give you some ideas of how to do it better. I've actually created a boundary cheat sheet for you. There'll be a link. You can download the cheat sheet. I actually created it specifically for this video for you guys to make it easier. And on that cheat sheet, there's going to be actual things that you can say to people. Because so much of the time, my clients will say to me, well, I didn't say anything because I don't know what to say. So let's just start with, what are boundaries? What are they actually? So we've all seen those signs, the no trespassing, violators will be prosecuted signs. Have you seen them? Well, that's a clear message. We understand what that means when we see them, which is stay out, get off, move away. The feeling that you get when you see a sign that says violators will be prosecuted, right? No trespassing, is that there'll be a consequence for someone violating that boundary. So this is the type of boundary that's pretty easy to understand, because when you think about it, it's physical. You can actually see this. You can see the sign. You can see a fence. Personal boundaries are a lot more elusive in some way, because the lines are actually invisible. The lines can change, and the boundary lines, what's necessary for each person, can really be unique to each individual. So you see how that complicates the whole situation a little bit. It's not so cut and dry. So what they actually are, boundaries, it really defines where you end and the other person begins, right? Each person has a different amount of personal space that they want or need between themselves and other people. So personal boundaries help you decide what types of communication you like, what kind of behaviors are okay for you, what types of interactions are acceptable to you. So let's talk about physical boundaries. This provides the barrier, right, between you and an intruding force, right? It's like a Band-Aid that protects a wound from bacteria, let's say. That's like a weird analogy, but you get what I'm saying. It's something between you and someone else. This is your body, your physical body. It also includes your sense of personal space and how much space you need. An example of physical boundary violation is a close talker. Have you ever been talking to someone and they're like right up in your grill and you're like, hey man, like step back, move away? So how do we communicate? We have body language. We're constantly communicating with our body language. So what do you do? Think about it. If someone is right up in your face, now me personally, I step back a space. And if that person then moves forward again, violating my boundary one more time, I'll say, hey, you're a little close. Can you just back up? I need a little bit of space. It's an automatic reaction when someone is violating your personal space to back up. We're trying to sort of protect ourselves. But then you feel invaded by that person. And then the next step would have to be, you have to verbally protect yourself basically from the invader. Other examples of physical boundary invasions are inappropriate touching, right, on the subway, anywhere. Unwanted sexual advances, that is also a violation of a boundary. And for those of you who are very snoopy in your relationships, you think you're a detective, or you're looking through your lover or your boyfriend, girlfriend's phone, their journal, looking at their emails, this is another profound boundary violation. Other things where other places where we need boundaries. We need boundaries. What are emotional boundaries, right? This protects our sense of self-esteem and our ability to separate our feelings from other people's feelings. So when you have weak emotional boundaries, it's like getting caught in the midst of a hurricane with no protection, right? You expose yourself to being super affected by other people's words, thoughts, actions, and you end up feeling, and you know this feeling, if it's happened to you, bruised, wounded, and kind of battered. If you don't have good emotional boundaries, you are just susceptible. This also includes beliefs, behaviors, choices, your sense of responsibility, and your own ability to be intimate with others in a way that you want to be. So let's look at an example of a boundary violation in a romantic relationship. Would be your partner, let's say, pressuring you to reveal what you talk about in your therapy, or when you're with a trusted friend. So think about this. Are you the person who grills your partner when they come back? So what did you talk about in therapy? Hey, some people don't mind, but it's really a violation of privacy. And in a healthy relationship, you have a right. It's fine for your partner to ask. But is it okay for you to say, oh, hey, that's actually between me and my therapist, and I don't feel like sharing it? Is that okay? Are you allowed to have that space in your relationship? Or if you don't, because that's a healthy response, is being able to say, hey, what's between me and Karen, what I talk about with my best friend isn't really, I'm talking about it with her and not you. So how about we can just leave that there? So that's a healthy boundary. Or do you divulge the details because you feel pressured to, because you don't want to, because you can't uphold your boundary, because you have weak boundaries? But does it feel good to tell that person the details of either your truest conversation with your best friend or your therapist? It probably doesn't feel great, right, when we think about it. Other examples of emotional boundary invasions are not knowing how to separate your feelings from your partner's and allowing his or her mood to basically dictate your level of happiness. So I want you to kind of think about that. Does your partner's, your sister's sadness completely dictate your sadness, right? And this is, I've already done a video on codependency, and that's exactly what that is about, which is codependency. Do you sacrifice your plans or your dreams or your goals in order to please others? This is also weak boundaries. Not taking responsibility for yourself and blaming others for your problems is also a sign of weak boundaries. Because if you feel very merged with others and things aren't going your way, it's easy to blame the other person or the situation, whatever it is. Listen, being in a relationship doesn't have to mean like losing your sense of individuality. And yet so much of the time it does, right? Obviously, nobody on purpose wants to have his or her boundaries violated, right? This isn't something that we do on purpose. But you have to also want to maintain your own autonomy. And again, that requires you stepping into your decisions, right? What it is that you want in your life, and not blaming someone else. Well, he won't let me, or she won't let me. That really is you not living your best life, because you're giving up your power. And a lot of times we're giving it up to people who don't even want it. I mean, in a really codependent relationship, yes, the other person does want it. But in actual life, when we have weak boundaries and we're blaming someone else, most of the time we don't even know what's actually going on with them. It's just our way, because it's so hard to draw the boundaries ourselves. So let's talk about why are boundary violations so common, right? Why do we not enforce and uphold? Why don't we support our own boundaries? Fear of rejection and ultimately fear of abandonment is the number one reason why. Fear of confrontation. How many of you hate confrontation? Raise your hand. All right, listen, I don't love it, but I do it, right? Well, I'm a therapist. I better do it. But in my younger life, I was the worst at it. It was my worst suit. I would act out my anger rather than talking it out. by being withdrawn in anger. I would be silent when I was young with a boyfriend. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything's fine. Oh, you seem like something's wrong. No, it's great. I mean, any of that sound familiar to you? So that is having an inability, or that is having weak boundaries because we are afraid of the confrontation. Also, guilt. Having boundaries. We feel like we always have to say yes to everything. Somebody wants something from us, and if we love them, we in a second abandon ourselves because we just feel guilty. And this is really, really common, especially with women in this country for sure. And lack of solid knowledge. This is probably the biggest one, you guys, which is why we're doing this video today. Lack of solid knowledge of how to actually do it. Did your parents sit down and say, hey, here are the ABCs of drawing healthy boundaries? They probably did not. So that's why I am doing it right now. Because all of these things, the weak boundaries, have everything to do with being in unhealthy romantic and platonic relationships. We need to have healthy boundaries in order to be in healthy relationships. So how can you be in a healthy love relationship if you can't draw healthy boundaries? Honestly, you can't. Let's talk about what are the difference between, and what are the healthy boundaries versus unhealthy boundaries. Then I'm going to give you some tips on how to do it. You can download it if you don't feel like listening, but either way, moving on. Healthy boundaries, what they give you is they allow you to have high self-esteem because you have self-respect. It feels good to say no with love. Trust me, there's a way to draw a boundary with a velvet glove. You can stay lovingly connected to someone and draw an amazingly effective boundary. And I find that this is a really big fear that so many women who have been in my practice over the years, they always say, I'm afraid that they're going to think I'm a bitch. I'm like, why? Because you're not acquiescing to every single request that comes your way? Does that really make you a bitch? It really doesn't. Other results from healthy boundaries is that or other indications of healthy boundaries is that you share personal information gradually in a mutual sharing and trusting relationship. So all of these Insta relationships where you pour out your entire life story and you're in a relationship, dating someone by date 2, they know everything you've ever done, every relationship you've ever had, right? Doing it in a healthy way, you also protect your physical and emotional space from intrusion. If someone you're dating grabs your phone, you don't start answering their questions about who the person is you texted. You go, give me my phone. Hello. And that should be a massive red flag where nobody has the right to do that. But if you weren't taught that, and if your boundaries were regularly violated in your childhood in so many ways, through sexual abuse, through violence, or just through a family that didn't tolerate people being separate. There's a very tribe mentality in a lot of families where if you are not towing the party line, you're in trouble. Having no sense of privacy. So there's no blaming. This isn't something that you would naturally know if nobody taught you. But hey, I'm teaching you now. So let's keep going. Healthy boundaries. Have an equal partnership where responsibility and power are shared. It isn't one where one person has all the power and the other person doesn't. With healthy boundaries, you can be assertive. You can confidently and truthfully say yes or no and be okay when others say no to you. Are you a person who freaks out if you don't get your way? Is it personal? Are you devastated if someone says no to you? Okay, well then hold up the mirror, because that's a mirror of you having poor boundaries. With good boundaries, you separate your needs, thoughts, feelings, and desires from others, right? You recognize that your boundaries and needs are different from others. So if your partner isn't you, if you're not twins, which you're not gonna be, there's space for that separateness. Also, empower yourself to make healthy choices and take responsibility for yourself. When you can do that, that is an indication of good boundaries. And basically, the bad boundary list is the opposite of everything I just said. You share too much too soon, right? You feel responsible for other people's happiness. You have the inability to say no for fear of rejection and abandonment. abandonment, weak sense of your own identity, right? So you base how you feel about yourself on how others treat you. You feel disempowerment, right? You allow others to make decisions for you. Consequently, you feel totally powerless. And also, it gives you that ability to stay in that victim mentality where it's not your fault, right? It's not your fault, it's someone else's fault. And now we're going to step into some tips for setting healthy boundaries. Okay, so when you identify a need to set a boundary somewhere in your life, you're going to do it clearly. That means using clear language, calmly, with firmness, right? You're doing it respectfully, because what I do find is that it's the beginning of drawing boundaries, you want to do it with like a sledgehammer, because you're so stressed about doing that it feels like you need to be like, and I'm not doing this anymore. The person's like, hi, that's the first I've ever heard about you not wanting to do it. So reel it back in, calm, and just state, right? You do it with as few words as possible. Do not justify why you're drawing the boundary. Try not to get angry. That's super important. Don't apologize for setting the boundary. Deepak Chopra taught me that you never have to convince anyone of anything, ever. So when you are clearly setting a boundary, you don't need that person's approval to set it. You get it? So that's the first thing. The second thing, you are not responsible for how the person reacts to the boundary that you're setting, right? You're only responsible for setting it clearly, concisely, communicating respectfully. If the other person flips out, this is not your problem. And you need to allow them to have space, like, hey, I see you're upset about this. That's it. Because guess what? Their upsetness is their deal, right? Especially those accustomed to controlling or being abusive to you, manipulating you. These people, trust me, every relationship is a dance. And these people are very used to that dance of you doing whatever it is they want you to do. So they're going to test you. One of my favorite psychologists, Dr. Harriet Lerner, she's so brilliant. She has all these books out, The Dance of Anger, The Dance of Deception, and she talks about relationships as a dance. And when you change the dance, meaning in a relationship where you haven't drawn boundaries, you're going to start to draw boundaries. Know that the other person is going to do what she calls a change back move. So what does that look like on the dance floor? You're dancing and now you're doing a new dance, and the other person, your partner, is like kicking you in the shin, being like, hey, I do this, then you do that. Why aren't you doing that? But you have to stand strong, and you're never going to be able to draw effective boundaries if you're constantly giving mixed messages, drawing the boundary and taking it back. So when you're on that relationship dance floor with someone and they're kicking you in the shin, you have to stick to the new dance, which is like, I see that you're upset, but this is really important to me, and this is how it needs to be for me to be happy, or what I need, or whatever that is. We'll get to the words later. So keep in mind, another thing to think about with drawing healthy boundaries is you'll probably feel guilty, selfish, embarrassed as you're setting boundaries, right? Do it anyway. Listen, you're never going to be great at something the first time that you try it, the first time that you consciously and with intention, mindfully try it. Think of everything you've ever learned in your life. So just cut yourself some slack. I always say to my clients, listen, I don't care if as you're drawing the boundary, you have snot pouring out of your face, you're bawling your eyes out, the ugly cry, you trip and fall and scrape I don't care. Friggin' do it. Any means necessary, because listen, we can get good at it as we go. But the only way that you're ever going to get good at it is if you do it. So the next thing is to know that when you feel anger or resentment, right, or find yourself whining or complaining, this is an indication that you probably need to set a boundary somewhere. Our denial as a defense mechanism is really crafty. So it can really look like, no, it's not about me drawing a boundary. It's really that he's just a jerk. No, it's not. If he's a jerk, then what's required is you draw a boundary. So I want you to dial into your feeling state. When you are in relationships, when you are feeling this way, when you're starting to get annoyed about something, you're starting to be angry, you're starting to be resentful, trust me when I tell you, you probably need to draw a boundary. And listen, you may be afraid to do it, but I promise you, you can do it. Even if you do it awkwardly, you'll get better later. It's fine. Another thing that's super important is that you have to develop a support system of people who respect your right to set boundaries. Eliminate the toxic weirdos from your life. And listen, if we're related to the toxic weirdos, I get that that's harder. I understand that. I'm not saying just cut yourself off from everyone in your life, but you know the friends who expect you to tell them everything. You know the friends who are constantly weighing in, giving you the unasked for advice and criticism, and the friends that when something good happens to you, they're not even that happy for you. You know them because we all have had them in life. Those are people that you need to draw boundaries with and distance yourself. As you're drawing boundaries, I want you to think about them and see them moving away from you. Energetically cut cords. I'm going to do a whole other video on cutting cords because it's so important. What I want you to take away from in this video is that you actually have the power to change what's not working in your relationships. You know, Gandhi says, we have to be the change we want to see in the world. Guess what? We have to be the change we want to see in our relationships as well. So that's probably enough info for one video, don't you think? So I'm going to, there's a link, and I've created a cheat sheet for you, which will give you a baseline starting of what it is that you need to do, starting with getting rid of the auto yes. We need to just friggin' stop saying yes to everything, okay? Just stop it. Buy time. But don't worry, in that little cheat sheet, there's going to be all this information. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with your friends, with your family, with some of those toxic people. Feel free. Social media. If you have not already, please join my YouTube channel. Subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. We are talking every single week on YouTube, just breaking it down, people asking questions, and I am in there because you know what, you guys, you know this. You are it for me. I am so committed to you being happy and healthy and having the amazing love that I know that you can have in your life. So, I hope you have an amazing week, drawing beautiful boundaries with love, with ease, with grace, and as always, take care of you.